Hi, my name is Jeff Byrne. I'm the owner of Cabin Fever Sporting Goods here in Victoria, Minnesota. We're right on Highway 5 on the southwest side of the metro area. We're here today to talk a little bit about some of the live bait that we can use for fishing. A little bit of history about Cabin Fever. We've been in business for 35 years. We started in a small little building and ran it there for about 12 years, and then we moved into this nice big building, so we're able to carry a lot more product for all the fishermen. So let's talk a little bit about some of the minnows that we have to offer. One of the most popular minnows that we use here are sucker minnows. Now, these are large sucker minnows, something that more people will use for fishing really big pike. They also use them for fishing catfish we use a lot of them on the Minnesota River around here. Of course, other metro areas would be like Mississippi River and the Crow River. So as you can see, they have a sucker on the end of them, so that's why we call them sucker minnows. This is a little bit larger one, again, used for pike and northern around here and for catfish on the Minnesota River. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of when you're using any kind of minnows is this is their top dorsal fin. A lot of people like to hook it underneath sideways, which is fine, but what they do is they get down into their air bladder in this part of the minnow, and the minnow doesn't live as long. So what we want to try to do is always hook it back here more in the meat of the tail. That way the fish lives a lot longer. It's got more activity to it. A lot of times if you hook it up top up here, it'll sit like this and they get a little bit more docile and they don't swim as much. If you hook it in the back, they'll tilt like this and they don't like to go that direction. So they kind of keep swimming to go back up that way. So hopefully you get a lot more action out of your minnow. One thing you want to be careful of, I held on to that for a long time, but you don't want to touch the minnows that much because it takes the slime off on the outside like you would a regular fish that you would catch, and then they don't live as long. One thing, if you notice, you see how my tanks are dark, they're black. One of the advantages of this black tank is the minnows will actually stay darker. If you notice maybe someplace where you go, they're light colored tanks, blue or white. The minnows are kind of a really light colored and they don't live as long. So that's why we put our tanks into this black tank here. So now let's step down a little bit further. These are fatheads. So you can see a lot different in size. These dark ones are the males here. You can see their head is really black. We use these for fishing walleyes a lot. Now, most of the time when you're walleye fishing, you're actually going to be hooking it up through the front of the minnow this way. That way when you're pulling it through the water, it's pulling it forward. You wouldn't want to hook that in the tail and then pull it like this because you wouldn't get very good action out of that minnow. If you're bobber fishing, then you can again go hook it in the back. But if you're putting a jig on the front, you want to hook it up through the middle. When we get a little bit bigger minnows, something like a shiner, those you can take and you can actually put through the mouth, through the gill, and come back and hook it right up into the back by the dorsal fin, and that works really good for jig fishing or just slowly pulling it, but mostly jig fishing. So these are the fatheads, more used for walleyes, could be used for bass. Now that we don't have a lot of sucker minnows this time of year, a lot of people are forced to use these and they're doing well for the bass on the lakes. Now we go a little bit smaller. And then this is called a crappie minnow. It's no relation to the crappie whatsoever, but because they're smaller, this is what most of the people will use for crappies. We catch a lot of big sunfish with these crappie minnows also. Same shape, same size that you would use for the crappies. Bigger fatheads. Sometimes guys will catch nice big crappies. We have a lake whale tail just on the north side of the cities, or St. Bonnie here, and we get a lot of state record crappies weighed out of there. 3 pounds, 15 ounces. And the guys will use fatheads for those because of the bigger fish. They want a little bit bigger minnow and they have a better chance for catching it. Same thing, you would hook them if you're bobber fishing in the back by the tail. Otherwise, if you're putting on a jig and trolling or casting, you would hook it right in the middle of the mouth and pulling it that way. Now, something that people kind of go ooh about and they don't like as much are leeches. Now the thing that you guys got to remember is that a leech and a bloodsucker are two different types. This is a leech right here. A bloodsucker will be very ribbony, very soft and mushy. And as far as I know, I don't believe even fish will eat bloodsuckers. They love leeches. Now, as you can see, I got it stuck to my finger a little bit, but it pops off right away. These again are not a bloodsucker. It won't suck blood out of you. It's very easy to hook. There's actually the sucker end of it right there. That's the end that you want to put the hook in. And the reason why is when it swims, we'll call it tail first, it'll swim that way. So when it's on a hook and you're on a bobber, or if you're slowly pulling along, you want this end of it to be trying to swim away, and it gives it a lot more action. This is what we call a jumbo leech, which is the most popular. People like these big leeches. Again, mostly used for walleye fishing. We sell a lot of them even to the bass fishermen. When we fish sunfish and bluegills, we'll actually take leeches and we'll cut these up into chunks and put them on the hook. We find this time of year, the bigger sunfish, they'll go after a leech more than will a waxworm or even some of the night crawlers. Early in the year, it seems like waxweeds work for everything, but this time of year, in July and August, the bigger fish will always get caught more on the leeches. And if you can stomach cutting them up, that's the best way to go. Plus, they're very durable. They stay on your hook. It's tougher for a fish to suck it off your hook before catching them. So remember, these do not hurt you. They're easy to hold on to. Just think of them as a wet night crawler. These are night crawlers. So a little bit larger size than an angleworm, both used for fishing panfish. The night crawlers are used a lot for fishing for walleyes. You can see a little bit of the size difference. Here, angleworm, redworm, wigglers, they've got a lot of different names, but again, these are a little bit smaller. We also carry day crawlers. Those are what we use only during the day. The toughest part about the day crawlers is we have to put sunglasses on all of the night crawlers so they can be called day crawlers, and they're more expensive because it takes longer to do that. I'm just kidding about that. So, as you can see with the night crawlers, it's larger. If you would hook just the night crawler up in the front of it and have this much hanging out, the problem is that the fish would come up and it would always bite the end of it off. So a lot of people, when they're fishing for walleyes, they'll use what they call a two-hook harness. They'll hook one part of the hook right here, and they'll have the other hook coming down here, and some even have three hooks which come down the end. The other process that they use is we call it a slow death hook. It's a large hook, like a bass hook, and what we do there is we run it down through the worm, and if you can see the ring on the worm, we're going to hook it right past the ring of the worm, and then we're going to cut the end of it off, and that way the fish don't get the end to just bite off, and we run that through the water, and it has a tendency to go around in circles. You can see the ring right here on this night crawler right there. So you run the hook through there and just come out that end, pinch it off about an inch behind there, and again it will go through the water just like this. The thing that's amazing is, where do you get these night crawlers from? You get these night crawlers in your backyard, you dig them up in your garden, if you put all your leaves in the back and you have a mulch pile back there. Put a little coffee down there, put a little water there once in a while. It works great for going and digging your own night crawlers. The thing that's unique about this, if you think about it, fish love these, but they're not in the water anywhere. So we're trying to figure out why a fish would eat something that it doesn't normally see in the water. But we've been using these forever and they work great. Again, you can cut these up in chunks to put on a panfish lure. We don't typically get a lot of crappies on night crawlers. They will bite a little bit, but the sunfish will love these, just like you bite or cut off the leeches and use those for bluegills also. It's kind of interesting that the crappie minnows are great for crappies and the big sunfish will bite there, but you don't catch as many crappies on worms as you do minnows. Again, this is a preference. The red wiggler, the angleworm, that's just a little bit smaller. maybe easier to handle. Again, cutting them up and putting them on a hook works great for panfish. Now, one other thing that we probably sell the most for panfish, let me wash my hands here, are what we call waxworms. A waxworm is actually what they call a bee's moth larva. There's not a lot of people that can grow a waxworm in captivity or for production for sale. It's kind of a secret that they make these and can grow these. It's just a small grubworm, and what happens is these get into, out in the wild, they get into people's beehives, and that's why they call it a bee's moth larva. And the beehive growers hate these because they get into their hives and they'll eat all their hives up, and then of course it's not good for their industry. What I like to do is, instead of threading the whole worm on, as you can see the hard head right there, if you take your hook and you run it about halfway through, up through that hard part of the head, it helps stay on the barb of your hook longer and makes it a little bit more difficult for the fish to take that off. So again, sunfish, crappies will still bite on these. So the waxworms, the night crawlers, the angleworms, and the leeches, and of course the crappie minnows are great for panfish. The angleworms and night crawlers and waxworms a little bit more pushed towards the sunfish, the crappie minnows for the crappies. But again, the night crawlers, you can use these, bass will bite on these, walleyes, fabulous bait for walleyes, angleworms for panfish, and then of course the leeches, you would be using those for bass, walleyes, or cutting them up for the sunfish. We carry largest amount of waxworms. We carry them in small amounts, mid-size, and huge bulk prices. Also, if you're going on a trip, maybe to northern Minnesota, and you need a lot of night crawlers, we carry night crawlers in bulk. We carry leeches in bulk. So just give us a call and stop in. And if you have any questions on how to use any of this, we're all here to help you out so you can catch a lot of fish.